people of Reddit, what is your holy crap she wasn't lying moment? I was an aggressively uncool middle school kid. My small group of friends and I would always hang in the same self-assigned spots, as would most of the other kids. Somehow, one of the cool redneck kids, small town Wisconsin so cool redneck was synonymous, found his way peripherally into my social circle and would hang around on occasion. The trouble was that this guy, I'll call him Brian, was a hugely obvious bullshitter about everything. Being that he was super cool and I definitely wasn't, I always meekly nodded along as he told me stories like how his dad rear-ended other motorists because he was soapy and the cops said Brian's dad was right to be angry with slow drivers and let him go. After school Brian, a middle school student, went and wrestled with the college wrestling team one town over because they knew he could keep up. Brian joined a special mailing list and got an exclusive Metallica CD that only a few people worldwide received. There were countless others, but as a weird kid in a small town, I knew my Metallica and I was able to cement that Brian was completely full of crap. However, social norms continued to be what they were and I continued to mutter oh, cool, that's so awesome to all his intermittent nonsense over the course of our academic careers. One late summer day, things felt weird around the school. The teachers were noticeably panicky and there were a lot of whispers that something, somewhere was going on and it was major. I was in gym class with Brian and he walked up to me and asked if I'd heard the news. I said I hadn't heard anything, but was internally prepared for whatever the latest bulls Brian had cooked up was. He leaned in and said they're sending everyone home early. Someone flew a bunch of planes into buildings in New York. I replied with a pretty typical oh wow, that's crazy man, haha wild stuff dude, and walked away thinking nothing of it. After class, we were told to report back to our homerooms and were sent home to be with our families. There were a lot of reactions to 9/11. I was probably the only person who spent the rest of the day really wanting to hear an exclusive Metallica CD. Once, when I was a kid, I got sick, stayed home from school for, like, a week and my parents bought me games they couldn't afford. I didn't feel that horrible, aside from having pain swallowing. It turns out that I had scarlet fever, a potentially deadly illness if I hadn't received medication. I'm still here 12ish years later though. Scarlet fever is strep with a rash. It's serious but susceptible to antibiotics. When I was a sophomore in college, a friend of mine sat down to have dinner and immediately started talking about how a girl had been found dead on campus. I asked him who it was and he couldn't remember, but he did that thing where you say various names while trying to figure it out. All of the names were very close to a girl I was friends with and had dated for a month or so freshman year. I cried out, "No, she can't be dead," and ran out of the dining hall and downstairs to the computer lab because he'd said there had been an email about it. Sure enough, there was the email from the president of the college and there was her name. It was a devastating moment of he was telling the truth. In Nigeria, in school with this boy who claimed his mother was a famous Nollywood actress at the time. I laughed it off because our school was not the type of school you would expect the child of a celeb to go to. He used to come in with unseen picture of her, but we assumed he somehow stole them or something. Internet was not a big thing back then. The funniest thing was he never took offense. He just found it amusing that we did not believe him. One day he was detained after school for failing to do his homework. He ended up going home about 2 hours after we finished school. The next day, lo and behold, this famous actress walks into the school with him by her side. She lashed out at our principal whilst 80% of the whole school watched in awe. This was right at the gate of our school. It was at that point that we all realized that he really resembled her as well. She lashed out at the principal and then left. He walks into the classroom and says, "Told you that's my mum." I think he got 3 girlfriends that day. Last year I got that flu. My grandfather, because my families are Franco-American, was in the hospital due to a stroke at 82. I didn't want to visit him due to the fear that my flu could transfer over to him and would make him die suffering battling both a flu and the aftermath of a stroke. I was pretty bummed out that I couldn't visit him. I was pretty depressed. But my mom brought the news that he had kicked the bucket. I thought that she was lying just to make me feel like it wouldn't have been my fault if he caught my flu and passed. But a couple days later, at a family reunion for that side, he wasn't there. He had this chair that he always sat in, and no one was in it. And also my aunts and uncles were crying. "Oh my god, he's actually gone," was the only words that echoed in my head. After a few days my flu subsided, but I got a lot of nausea. I missed maybe 2 weeks of school and then I went to the doctor and he said that I had a severe case of acid reflux. He prescribed me some omeprazole, generic brand Prilosec, and when I was done that I still felt nausea and my heart beated fast. That's how I found out I got anxiety. At his ceremony, when Marines were folding my papiers flag and gave it to my uncle, he broke down. Now this is a man that owns a Corvette and has Ron Swanson type facial hair. He was the last person I'd expect to cry. It was the most heartbreaking moment in my life. I remember reading his obituary and I found out a bunch of stuff that he never told his family. One of the things I can remember is that he invented the alarm system for all of the USA's nuclear plants. If I was in his shoes I'd tell that to every person in my family. He was so humble. Here's to you, Papier. Cheers to your Papier. An old friend of mine told me when he was 16 he had a girlfriend named Nina Agdal. We were 19 at that moment and of course I didn't believe him. He then continued to show me pictures of him and her. They were kissing in one of the pictures. I still couldn't believe it was her, so I asked some of his friends. Apparently he was telling the truth all along. Frick that guy. When I asked my GF how she is doing and she said okay and she was actual okay. I just told her about this. She said that's fine but it was a joke and she is actually fine. I don't know what's real anymore. I'm actually not lying about any of this. Hearing it's fine is worse than hearing frick you fricking butthole, I never want to talk to you again. I was 7 years old, and my best friend told me at school that he had a talking car. He used to say so many jokes and always had been creative, so nobody believed him. Plus it was 1991. Fast forward in 2004. That friend lives then in Canada and invites me for a few days. We are from Belgium. Arriving there he told me his dad made his old car transported from Belgium to Canada. I go inside the car and when the engine is running, I swear to God, a voice starts saying crap like tire pressure okay, careful front light broken. It was a 1991 Renault and one of the best sorry you were right I ever had. Kind of reverse story but happened yesterday. Standing in McDonald's waiting to order. Guy next to me is like I wonder if it will work from here, trying to lock his car door instead of stepping outside in the storm again. He tries it with no success. As he is about to button up his jacket I tell him to hold the keychain thing up to his chin and try again. He looks at me sideways like WTF are you talking about? I tell him it will basically turn his skull into a mini tower and should increase the range. He chuckles at me and tells me it barely works when he's more than 5 feet away from the car. I tell him to humor me and try it. The look in his eyes when the car lights blinked to indicate the doors got locked was priceless. After being led to believe my father was an abusive sociopath for my entire childhood, my husband asked me, do you have memories of any of that happening? My incredibly controlling mother had recently created a rift between she and I, which led to me feeling deeply depressed about having no family of my own that This moment and this question was pivotal in my life like no other I've ever experienced. I realized she might have brainwashed me against him to keep ultimate control and to punish him for their divorce. She is a textbook narcissist and sadly happily that ended up being exactly the case, as I would later learn. And I had the frustrating and life-altering realization that I had believed her delusions religiously until the age of 26. I reached out to him that same week for the first time since I was 12 with the expectation that either none of it had happened or it had and I just needed to hear it for myself. It was the best choice I've ever made and I owe it all to my husband and that single moment of realization. I've been no contact with her for 6 blissful years and had my father, stepmom, just mom, to me, and siblings in my life for 5 amazing years. Her lies and manipulations led to a lot of dark days for me, but the joy of finally breaking free of them was worth it. And, yes, I am a card-carrying member of RA Saber Narcissists. They've helped me greatly. If my story sounds familiar to you, please come visit. I wish I would have broken her spell ages ago, and I might have if I'd stumbled across these folks sooner. Thanks. Need this. Some of my friends got invited to play extras in a movie filmed near us. They show up to a ballpark to fill seats for a scene. Later that day, they're all telling me how one of our friends got hand selected to sit next to the lead actress, a big name, during the scene and he's gonna be in the movie. There were close to 1,000 people there. My friends are all notorious bullshitters, so I wasn't giving much credence to the story. They kept swearing up and down that they weren't lying, but I wasn't hearing it. So fast forward like 6 months to the release day and they're all excited to go see it. It was kind of a chick flick, so I was like, okay, cut the crap guys. I didn't want to waste money on the movie just to have them all laugh at me in the theater. Well, they convinced me to go and sure enough, opening scene, there's my friend's stupid face plastered against the silver screen, sitting right next to one of the most famous actresses of our time. The exact words out of my mouth were, "Holy crap, you guys weren't lying." Every year from middle school to high school, I would have a sleepover on my birthday soon after my birthday. I would have a few here and there throughout the year, but the birthday ones were special for 2 reasons. 1. Everyone would come. Always a lot of fun, the whole gang. 8-15 preteen males in one basement. As you would expect, these would get very weird, and that is reason number 2. Something memorable always happened. I believe it was my 13th birthday party that this happened, about 7 years ago. At some point in the middle of the night, cause who the frick sleeps at sleepovers, we somehow got into the convo of dong sizes. One of my friends, Evan, bragged about his 8-inch dong that was wider than it was long. Sure, he was one of the tallest in the group and was probably the strongest, but he was also the most arrogant and ouchy of us all. So no one believed him. So what does he do? He takes one of my other friend's phones, walks into bathroom, locks himself in there for about 5 minutes, comes out, and gives us the phone, saying just watch the video. We actually gathered around this kid's phone to watch this video. As soon as he hits play, I noped the frick out. There it was, his dong in all its glory. I don't recollect even what it looked like, but all I remember is that from that day forward, we knew why he was always a dong. It may have been that birthday party itself that he also stuck his dong in the mouth of 2 kids who passed out. Evan, if you're reading this, you were a sick freak. Oh god, having the name Evan has never given me this much anxiety reading a comment. LOL. My grandpa used to tell me how he was some amazing black belt karate guy, paraphrasing OFC, and used to train with the likes of Chuck Norris and John Natividad. I find out years later he wasn't bullshitting. He had pictures and everything, and he recently went to a reunion in Las Vegas. Went to basic training with a guy who claimed he was a multimillionaire and had joined for fun. We all thought it was bulls, of course. Well, they finally let us have access to an ATM to check balances, etc. And he shows us his account balance and had more than 3 million in there. We all shat bricks. No one will probably see this and I kinda have to be vague because this was a very recent occurrence, but there was a holdup recently in my city of a convenience store, the guy's weapon of choice being an axe. My best friend texted me a couple days after it happened saying the guy who held up the store was a friend of her ex-boyfriends that we used to always hang out with and would stay at our house when we all lived together. Really couldn't believe it until I got online and saw the stills from the security camera footage. Holy crap was an understatement. Friend told me that he convinced this girl at a debate tournament that there was a Q in his name and that the person listings spelled his name is wrong. I was convinced he was full of crap. Then I turn around and a girl runs up to him yelling scam and giving me a hug. What the frick? I believed David Bowie died, but for some reason when I heard about Alan Rickman I cold wrapped my head around. Literally thought I was being lied to. Googled to confirm. Then came the sads. My mother told me he'd died and I said, no he didn't. She kept saying it and I kept denying it. It wasn't until I saw it on Facebook that it actually set in. Actually, I don't think it's fully sunk in yet. Now ex-boyfriend was watching Gangs of New York because his cousin was in it. I asked who, thinking it was some random extra. Nope. Christmas with famous lady that year shut me up. My best moment was when I was 9. I was riding horses at my cousin's house. The horse started trotting and I slipped off, slamming my foot into a metal pole. My whole family said I was faking it. It was a sprain, and I needed to walk it off. My ankle was the size of a goose egg and it was incredibly painful for a 9-year-old. When my dad came later that evening he flipped out and took me to the ER. Turns out I fractured my ankle and has the biggest "I told you so" grin on my face. My best friend is a compulsive liar. I've caught her in so many lies that I never believe a thing she says anymore. A year ago she tells me she has thyroid cancer. I thought she was bullshitting me to get attention, so I brush it off like whatever fricking liar. A couple weeks ago she and I get really drunk and she starts bawling her eyes out to me. I ask her what's wrong and she says that her cancer has spread to her breast. Again I was like okay whatever. And so she takes my hand and she had me feel her breast. She had crazy huge lumps. Ever since I've felt so horrible for not believing her. Never feel bad for not believing a liar. That's her fault. When I got a call from my stepdad, I live in a different country from the rest of the family, saying mom just had a heart attack and is off in the hospital. I thought for real he was fricking with me first since we would occasionally prank each other like pretending that you dialed wrong and now talking to the cops or something. It took a while to sink in. I made fast friends with a girl on the first day of kindergarten. I already knew several of my classmates but she was brand new, had just moved from Texas, lived with her World War II generation grandparents and was hiding behind her grandmother's skirt. I ran up to her, told her my name, asked if she wanted to be best friends and that was that. She had a habit of telling tall tales at times, mainly funny stories, just to tease people. She told people in the class that we were sisters who grew up on a soybean farm in Texas and a helicopter brought us to school every day. Some knew it was crap and laughed but others believed it. So, when she told me her grandparents had put a ladder up to her bedroom window, climbed up and took her from her mom when she was 2, I was not 100% sure what to believe. She seemed very sincere. Not too long after her grandparents wanted to meet with my parents and get to know them better before we started having sleepovers. They went out to dinner. When they returned my parents sat me down and told me my friend had in fact been kidnapped by her grandparents when she was 2. She was born premature and addicted to drugs. Her mother lived in a 2-story house with several people in a drug ring. Her grandparents put a ladder up to her bedroom window and took her. Her dad was making LSD and running C at the time so he was not a stable option either. They then went to court and got custody. The truth is often much stranger than fiction. ETA. Her dad did stop moving and doing drugs. He moved to be closer to her and be a part of her life. He told me horror stories I wish were not true but no they were. Like the time her mom dropped window pane after doing several lines when she was 7, not 9, months pregnant with her and started having seizures. Good times, I'm sure. My father told us, his kids, he had lymphoma and was dying. Everything he told us didn't add up when we did some research. He had lied about being sick a few times in the past to get attention, even saying he had cancer once. We all thought this was a repeat performance. When we asked specific questions, he would evade. He would tell us he was on experimental medicine, but wouldn't tell us the name of the drug. He would say he had symptoms that didn't match lymphoma as a diagnosis. Well, one day we went over his house and he was really unresponsive, just totally out of it, so we got him to the hospital. Once there he seemed to get better. We assumed he would be discharged. He took a turn for the worse. We tried to ask his doctors what was wrong with him, but they told us they couldn't speak to us about it. It was clear he told them not to, validating our suspicions. Nevertheless, he got worse and worse. In a few days he was gone. Turns out, he was dying. But he didn't have lymphoma. He had AIDS. One of the doctors let the information slip. I'm unsure if he did it accidentally. The nurse in the room looked over at us awkwardly, knowing he instructed them not to tell us. The doctor might have decided that we should know, so he made an intentional accident. I can't be certain. Either way, we all realized he wasn't lying about dying. He was just lying about how. Needless to say we felt really guilty about not believing him. Coworker told me he won the Powerball a few years back. Yeah, whatever. So he invited me to a Christmas party at his house. I get there, walk through the garage and see several Ferraris, Audi R8s and those really nice Jaguars. Crap, he wasn't lying. I'm joke about this. Then I remembered smelling smoke on my way home, then I turn on the news and there it is. Got 2 weeks off though. I had just moved myself, my girlfriend, my mother, and her boyfriend to Florida. 16-hour drive down in a huge moving truck. A few of my friends came along to help and celebrate spring break at the same time. One night we decided to go out to Siesta Key to celebrate and have fun. I had visited several times before and knew the area. It was a Wednesday night and not too much was going on, or so it seemed. Most of us had finished up our night of drinking and were ready to go back. One of my friends decided he wasn't ready to call it quits and he'd get a cab home. The next morning we realized he got back just fine and we discussed the events of the previous night. The guy who stayed out started telling us this bizarre tale about how he was at a bar we hasn't gone to and played in a flip cup tournament and won. Everyone was chanting his name. Not that incredible honestly, but he says that afterwards, he inserted his face into two girls making out and had a three-way with their mouth organs. Getting fishy now. He then proceeds to say he got one of the girls' numbers as well. We're all calling bulls because this guy isn't a ladies' man at all. We go outside and find a trail of Slim Jim wrappers outside leading to the house. He also has a scrap of paper with a phone number on it. What? We called the number and it was a random guy, not girl, and he didn't know what was going on. We're fairly impressed this all even happened. We all go to the bar that the friend was at last night. About an hour after we were there, a group of people come in and go, hey it's friend. The group of people confirmed the story. We now never question his adventures. Playing games with a friend in the basement. Battlefield 3 I believe. Sister yells from the top of the stairs, our cat, 2 years old, is dead. I'm like, no, he's fine. When I get out to the driveway, I find his corpse rolled over, multiple pools of blood and a popped out eyeball. I just dropped, wrapped his body in a towel and cried as I carried him away from his spot. Apparently he was sleeping under one of our cars and my sister didn't know that when she started to back up. He was rolled by the car a few times before dying in severe pain. I can still see darkened blood spots on the driveway. The pain still hasn't subsided, even though it was 4 years ago. I had a friend in high school who was double jointed in the wrist and could rotate her hand almost 360 degrees. Holy crap was one of the things I said after doubting her mutant ability. I had a friend in freshman college who told me about this guy friend of hers who she dated before, who was apparently with a girl who didn't like her so much. Was kinda jealous, probably, since the two were still really close. Anyway, the girl the guy was with was telling him things like, please cut that girl off from your life. If you leave me I'll kill myself. That sort of thing. I told my friend that the other girl was just, clingy and attention seeking, and she agreed. But I told her to take care when dealing with her because she might actually kill herself. That sort of thing. One day my friend tells me that the other girl says she had pneumonia, and that the guy shouldn't leave her. We chalked it off as her standard attention seeking. Turns out it was true. It felt kinda bad, talking crap about her when I barely knew her, but I'm sure it must feel worse for my friend. Please assign names to these people. I'm so lost on which she/her is being referred to. My BF said he cut off his thumb and pointer, thought he was exaggerating and said, pics or it didn't happen. Them shoots is gone, for real. Poor baby. I had a crush on this girl in middle school. I later found out that there was 2 of them. She was a twin. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.